Welcome to the Lost and Foundry Show, where we do a deeper dive into the life and the leadership of the Foundry Ministries. Excited to have you with us today. Today our guest is Graham Bufford, our Director of Aftercare and Director of Changed Lives Christian Center. Graham, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. I'm really excited to be here. I think this is so cool.
Well, appreciate your time. We had spoken some before and had some questions. I just wanted more than anything to have a conversation with you and hear your heart about how God has led you to the Foundry and what you do. First question is, tell us about your faith journey. You're a graduate of the Foundry, which makes you unique in some ways. Tell me about your journey as a graduate and then moving forward.
Well, this year I am blessed to celebrate 10 years of sobriety. I'm really excited about that. So I came to the program August 2010. I just really radically got changed and saved while I was here. Really bought into the process and just pretty much any way that I could engage. I did. I did. The classes and went to our church partners and attended Pastor Mark's discipleship counselor training course. Actually did that 4 or 5 times. And so when I was kind of in that piece to transition out, I was using our resource center to use the computer to actually reapply into college, which was always a big deal for me. So it was such a disaster to get back in, and I believe it was just the enemy trying to stop me, because what would happen if I ever built momentum in that. But I like the draft, the United States Army Draft Board couldn't find my application. Like I remember that because I wasn't high when I submitted that one, right? So I had to go back through all that process, get all my transcripts from Auburn where I had messed that up, and so finally I get into Jeff State, right? And so I'm having to pay this gas money to get rides back and forth and go to employment readiness here, and went to 2 classes one semester and then 1 the next, and then that was around the time that I actually got my apartment through a program that the Foundry was doing. Moved into that apartment, and then it became time for me to move into a university, right? And so at this time I got my little apartment. I'm doing my 35-hour a week pet store job, slinging 50-pound bags of dog food until 10 o'clock at night. And just trying to make it just as anybody else. I was going to church and trying to speak and be a part of groups and stuff. I was actually one of the first ever Genesis facilitators here. And so I tried to apply to UAB, and it wasn't funny then. It's funny now, but the first time I applied, they said, "No way, dude, you cannot get into this prestigious university." So there was a wonderful Christian man in Jeff State who was part of the appeals process. So I went through that, wrote him a letter, basically said, look, I got nothing other than a prayer here. Please let me back in. This is how I was stupid as a kid in Auburn. This is how I got accountability and support now, and it's where I've been through, graduated the Foundry and all that other kind of stuff. And so actually, which I thought was fast for an academic university, they mailed me a letter. I got it 2 days later after I sent mine in, and they were like, all right, you've got 24 semester hours to pull it past this GPA, and then you really are finished, right? So I remember the first day I got enrolled, I went straight to the undergraduate's dean's office, and I said thank you, and of course he was like, what, So I mean, I really took off from that university. I actually, while I was here, the scriptures that talk about teaching just started to glow to me, and so I thought I was going to be a high school math teacher, right? Yeah. So I'm at UAB School of Education. I'm doing this. I'm in these education leadership organizations, which is really cool because once you get into that officer level, they pay for you to travel around the country. Wow. I'm learning how to build teams. I'm learning how to build these huge events across 600 and 700 school people from all different people from all over the country, and so that was really great. But then the position for a men's counselor opened up here, and I had prayed about it, talked with my pastor about it, and it was just like, the Lord telling me this is your next step. Well, you can't student teach. right, and work here.
Yeah.
So I basically finished with my bachelor's in mathematics, and actually walked away just because of all the mess in Auburn, not because I'm like a savant. But I walked away with three minors with sociology, psychology, and education.
Wow.
And so was super stoked about that, and came into the job, loved the job, loved the work, loved the people. I experienced it mostly from one side of the desk, like someone's pouring into me, and I get the opportunity to share and pour into people and watch the transformation happen before my eyes. And I remember I was talking with a mentor, another strong Christian leader at the School of Ed, and she was like, "Well, this is good. This is happening. I see you got a new car and things are happening for you, and you ought to apply to grad school." And I was like, "No, no, 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 no." And she just really put it to me that she's like, I feel like it would be a waste of your potential, and I think that there's more in you, and that you want more. And so I applied to UAB's Master Counseling Program, went through that. That was an amazing process. I grew so much from that. But this is around the time when I enroll in that program. That's when things really started to change with my role at the Foundry. So there is this major shift from kind of leaving things as is in the latter stages of the program to really being more intentional, really being more life-giving, really being more involved at that latter stages of that process. And so, Micah, our CEO, was listening passionately to this, and it kind of just got to a place where he's like, all right, I believe you. It's important. It's a big deal. And so he basically said, I'm going to form up this little group of the most passionate advocates, and you guys are going to sit down and hash it all out, right? Bring me back a proposal, and then we'll figure it out from there. And so they met and had these different breakout sessions, brainstorming what goes here, what's good, what doesn't work. And so they called one day a meeting of graduate staff members, which I was part of, current Phase 5 program participants, and then people that were graduates but weren't on staff, just were doing well and came back.
Yeah.
So we were in this great big room with 3 dry erase boards on it, and we were talking, and they were asking us all these different kinds of questions. And so I wanted to go last. And by that time, that all the dry erase boards are full, and I remember this like it was yesterday. And so I said, "Listen, guys, this is great, but none of this is going to matter unless there is like a person leading this, and that's why it's not happening, because there is nobody leading the charge, right? Yeah. There's a group of you trying to go towards an idea, but not a leader, not as a person, not as a shepherd doing this." Yeah. And so then I go into ideally it would be great if this person was a graduate. This person needs to be educated both academically and spiritually. This person really needs to have a drive to see people. And so I named off these number of things, but I didn't realize it at the time. But I was describing me. Right, and so the job that I have was literally my idea. Awesome. And so the proverb says that gifts and callings make a way for you. And so I remember as I said that and spoke that out, people that I always thought were way smarter than me in that room just kind of looked around like, why haven't we thought of that? And so my thing was I guess it was God had appointed that time and ordained that time for me to be there and for me to be the one to say it. Yeah. Now there was a pretty brutal interview process that I went through, and praise God made it out on the other side. But and around that time I finished my master's degree, got my clinician's license, and a couple other bells and whistles. But yeah,
that's awesome. How did you see God's hand throughout your journey preparing you to what you're doing now? Kind of the markers that you saw along the way.
So one thing that I just thought was it actually, when I learned this, it actually gave me chill bumps. So the campus that I currently have the pleasure of serving in leadership, the walls of that place actually went up the month and year that I was that I did intake at the Foundry.
Wow.
Right. So the walls of Changed Lives went up at that time. So that's one. Another piece is when I did do these things for the educational leadership associations and building these teams and stuff. I on a lot of different teams here at the Foundry, is involved with a lot of different projects. But one of the things that I'm most excited about as far as giving back to the community for people when we send them back out to go live productive lives is that we've created these massive community serve projects that we do 6 times a year. And if I hadn't have done that in other places in other parts of the country with all this diverse set of teams or whatever, I probably would have been intimidated or overwhelmed. But now I just think it's fun.
Awesome.
So that's another one. And then with education became a really big passion of mine. I just really feel like that God was with me at every book that I read, every article I reviewed, every test that I submitted, every assignment that I completed. God was with me like, this is how this is relevant to you and how it's going to contribute to life change one day.
Awesome. What does your current role at Foundry entail, and what does Aftercare mean in the scope of things? And you spoke about free for life. What does that mean?
Okay, so in kind of simple terms, I just kind of say Aftercare is the next steps after the next steps. So what happens next? We have a lot of research, a lot of material, a lot of resources about what to do with someone in that maybe 30-day, year-long period when they're actually doing a recovery program. But what happens after that? And so anything after that is what we refer to as Aftercare. One of the things I'm most excited about, because it's something I get to participate in, is we offer lifelong counseling services to people, lifelong commitments, and they can get services from us just as they would anywhere else from any mental health agency. We can work with them in those kinds of issues. I think Aftercare is establishing that lifelong relationship with God. And turning that vision into a legitimate process that they can walk out in daily freedom.
Awesome.
So the Foundry way, I just kind of consider that as the Foundry's modus operandi. Like that's our process. That's how we get in there, and that's how we make it work. So Aftercare is actually a whole fifth of the Foundry way. There's 5 components with case management, counseling, education, and teaching. And employment readiness, and then so there's Aftercare over there kind of hanging out and like, okay, in all of this and all of this picture, how can we continue this? How can we continue these habits? How can we posture their best for success when they transition out? And so we kind of do that from a specific mindset, a specific conceptual framework or a model, if you will. And the Bible says that without vision, people cast off restraint. It means kind of they go boundaries are off the boundaryless or off the reservation. And so we're constantly casting that to them, letting them know that like this isn't the end all be all there is to recovery, but what's most important is how we do it, the principles that are underneath it, right? So we the model basically stems off the scripture from John 5:24, where Jesus basically says that the person who believes in my word and the one who has sent me, that person has already passed from death into eternal life. So we took that word pass, right? Because the idea is that they get passed off into my area of influence in our team, and then we help them pass back off into productive society. So we took that word pass and made a little acronym or cross stick out of it. So P stands for prepare for a purpose. And we kind of view that as the target, so to speak. So we want people to be leaders in their careers. We obviously want them to make money. Like it's kind of like sometimes it's like pretty please with Jesus on top, get a job. And so that's great. But if having a job was enough to keep people out of trouble, you and I wouldn't have a job, right? Right. So we want them to really think about who they are as people. Gets involved with the 2 principles of stewardship and humility, right? Humility says that I need God and other people, whereas pride says I don't need God and I don't need anybody else, and that's a dangerous place to be. Stewardship, basically, anything that is given to us came straight from the hand of God, and even though He gives it to us to be, led and stewarded, it ultimately belongs to Him. And we need to take care of it, whether it's relationships or our apartment or our cars or our pets or whatever. And so when we have that mindset of how we contribute to a higher purpose, then we're ready for perpetual next steps. We're ready for growth, and we're ready for learning throughout the rest of our lives. That usually turns into just kind of like how your story is or my story is. God will turn that into a career as long as you take those first initial steps and have the right attitude about it. The A with acceptance within accountability. So this is probably the least popular one out of all of them. As John Maxwell says, accountability is just not a sexy word. People don't get out of bed in the morning and they're like, I just can't wait for someone to call me on my hypocrisy and be transparent with me. Nobody does that.
No.
But that's the way we were created to live. You don't put your business out on Front Street with everybody.
Yeah.
But we have measurable outcomes and classes and drug tests while they're here. But what we want is people to be receptive to feedback of others, right? That's how we grow. That's how we develop. But without a sound, firm foundation in who they are as a person and their worth, it's going to be hard because they're not going to be able to separate who they are from what they do, right? But if you can separate from who you are and what you do, you can receive feedback from people and you won't take it personally and just have a temper tantrum and quit, right? I've certainly been there. Next was security amidst support. Now, we're on fire for Jesus here. Of course, we make no apologies for that. But when we say a support system, we're talking about the local church. We have all the ingredients here to help people. We have a worship center here, which is really nice. We have lots of things to support someone, but we're not a church. Now, we're capital C, part of the church and the body of Christ, but this is not a church, right? And so we're trying to plant seeds in the hearts of people, but seeds have to grow roots down first before they grow up. And God is very specific in His Word about putting down roots inside a local church. It's clear that He uses that as the most effective means to meet people's needs. And it's also the best place to get the kind of relationships that you need. Now, nobody's perfect. And people are going to let you down, but the Bible talks about how the church is a great restraining force, and that when you're around people of like precious faith, right, you're supported, you're safer, you're in a community, right, and then lastly, significance experienced through service. Now, whereas accountability is not so popular, this one tends to be the most popular out of the whole framework because it has to do with emotional stability. Yeah. Now. At the Foundry, we have the curriculums, right? We have the counseling sessions. We have the coping skills. We have the mindfulness skill set and all that other kind of stuff that we're trying to tell people to deal with stress in the moment as it happens. But what if there really was a secret to long-term emotional stability, right? Wouldn't that be something? Turns out that there is, right? And so, one time the disciples were arguing amongst each other about who was the greatest. Right. I'm greatest because I cast out this many demons or I preach the gospel to this many people. And so Jesus kind of walks up among them and it's like, what you guys talking about? And then they felt all bad because He's the greatest and there's really no question about that. Yeah. But I don't know if you've ever tried to tell an anxious or a depressed person like, oh, it's fine. Don't be anxious. Like, oh, thank you for that magical, I'm good. So it doesn't work that way. And thank God Jesus knows this. Right. And so He didn't tell them like bad Christians for feeling things incongruent with who you are as a person. Yeah. He didn't do that. He said, if you want to be great, right, if you want to feel significant about who you are and your life, then you'll serve, right? And of course, now we know that it's not just a spiritual truth, it's scientific fact. People that serve live longer, their qualities of health are better, their relationships are better, their pets live longer, right? So all kinds of interesting stuff. But just for having that mindset of my life matters because I can give back to other people.
What are your credentials at UAB? And where are you headed? You've shared some with me that you're preparing for more degrees, more credentials. Tell us about that.
I hope this isn't something that's boring to people. I mean, because nobody's favorite subject other than themselves. But I won't go too far on this. But yeah, my bachelor's degree is in applied mathematics, and I remember someone asking me that. What does that have to do with addiction? Well, mathematics in its basis form is study of patterns. So do people have patterns? You betcha. And so that's been really practical. But I'm also a problem solver, like literally, right? And then the master's degree that I have from UAB is a master's of counseling. It's the accredited program from the highest accreditation in the land, KCREP. And I am also, after that, you have to go through a couple of check boxes, but I'm also a licensed mental health clinician. So things that anybody in that position can do, I can do one-on-one in groups. There are things that I can share with other people that work here that would be effective in helping, just lead life change. I'm actually in the process of finishing postgraduate marriage and family certificate at UAB right now, and so through that, I've really been able to be better equipped to kind of dealing with families as a systemic issue, right? And a lot of times it's about the whys. But when you get a family in a room and all that stuff in one room, it's like, okay, yeah, this has happened, and people got to take responsibility. But like, this thing is happening between you guys, and this is what the enemy is. Like, we got to get that outside of y'all. Get to where you guys are working together as a team and facing that together, right? So there's that, and then I am currently enrolled in Arizona State with a doctorate of behavioral health.
Fantastic.
So what that is basically trying to see how we can basically build models where mental health services, things that are common like anxiety, depression, some of the more traumatic things, because it's likely that they're going to go to a primary care setting more than they would like a therapist or even like a program like ours. And so how do we meet those things together? And right now, UAB School of Nursing has taken over our medical clinic over at Change Lives and trying to turn that into a full integrated care site, which again, like I didn't know that when I did the doctorate program or whatever. And so the leadership over in that team were like, heard that I was doing that, were like, oh really? And so like, look, we can get you to do all this stuff, so it's been really interesting. But as far as that piece goes, I think that there are things out there that we can learn from mental health in a professional level that doesn't get us to compromise our values or throw off our moral compass. And there's so much out there that is shown to be effective and shown to be helpful. And I think that we need to get on that. I think we need to get some more of that. I think we need to be open to growing in those ways, not compromising who we are as a ministry or as even as individuals. But if it works and it's effective, let's see how we can apply it here. Maybe it fits, maybe it doesn't.
What is the Change Lives Christian Center, and what is your role as director of that facility mean?
So when I interviewed for this job, as I said, the kind of idea that it was, I was really just looking forward to kind of being on the counseling piece, not so much the leadership or administration. But when I finally made it to one of the last rounds of interview, Micah basically said that what we're looking to do is kind of have Change Lives be an aftercare hub. In other words, our aftercare campus. So we have other facilities that we use or other dormitories, but that is kind of the flagship of our aftercare ministry, so to speak. And in just a quick nutshell, Change Lives basically does three things. One is the post-recovery and transitional facility. Now that's all the time, 24/7, 365, with about 56 beds. Right, and people will come. You have to be employable there, but we're looking for someone for like a 6 month to 2 year commitment. They come in. We try and help them, get them on a plan, get them on growth, get them on targets to set, and then the ultimate win of that piece is when someone becomes head of household. Right, sometimes it takes 6 months, sometimes it takes longer than 2 years. But obviously, if someone isn't engaged. You keep planting seeds, and eventually you're going to get something to pop out of the ground. Then the second thing that we do is the rescue meal service. Now this is, I think, one of the coolest things that we get to do. We have a school bus, like a legit school bus that goes out every Tuesday and Thursday and Sunday night. And we go literally pick up the homeless community of Birmingham, bring them back to our campus, and we feed them and we love on them every Tuesday, every Thursday, every Sunday night, right? So it's cool because, sometimes it's us that's serving the meals. Most of that work comes from our outreach center through that team. But other times, like a little bit less than half is from other church groups. And so...
do you need more churches to help?
Yeah. actually, we could always use more churches to come and partner with us. It's as simple as coming there and preparing the meal and being present the whole time. Some of the people would just prefer to okay, here's the nom-noms, and love you, and we'll see. So however, but most people enjoy coming to the campus and spending time there and being part of the atmosphere. We have this big giant pavilion. Sometimes we have this big smoker out there. Sometimes we do large barbecue things. But for the homeless community, sometimes we're really all that they have. In terms of toiletries and basic needs and stuff, and then the third thing, which is I'm just fired up about, like I'm shaking, talking about it, is the medical clinic.
Yeah.
And that is where it's kind of like this giant setup takedown job where people come in and they set it up to turn it into basically a one-stop shop, 3-hour primary care place. And we see anywhere between 80 and 120 patients.
Wow.
It is just but totally legit.
Do you turn anyone down?
No. The only
stay to the last.
Yep, to the last person gets served. And as far as that goes, really the only thing that would deter someone for service is if any inappropriate behavior, disruptive, or anything like that. But that's why we have police. And so that piece is so important because whereas the rescue stuff, sometimes that really is all they have, but like legit the medical care, they really can't get that anywhere else. And to see how that has been building momentum and how they've been adding a piece here, adding this nurse practitioner here, putting more availability for this types of prescriptions here, because we have that on-site medical closet. Now, we don't keep any Schedule 2 or above or any narcotics there or whatever, but just basic medications that people need prescriptions for in order to be, things like hypertension or diabetes and stuff. These are real health concerns. So,
what message of hope for those watching? Maybe they have a loved one, or maybe they themselves are in a very dark place and they feel like it's great things have worked out for you, Graham. But what word of challenge, word of encouragement you can give them that to meet them where they're at in this place of darkness and hopelessness?
Addiction is such a big deal in how it affects so many different systems and so many different lives. But what I would say is just don't stop believing. I know that sounds like a Journey song, but literally, don't stop believing that change is possible. It may not be evidence right now that you're seeing. Don't stop believing and have faith. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the essence of things not seen. So just because you don't see it right now doesn't mean that it couldn't happen or even it won't happen. But it was years. We're talking decades before I made a turn toward God. And it wasn't that people weren't praying. And it wasn't that I didn't grow up in a good home, and it wasn't that they didn't try everything humanly possible. But I got to a place where I was just ready to receive. And as long as people were breathing, right? If that's a loved one, or if that's a person that is going through the addiction struggle themselves, as long as you can breathe air in your lungs, then there is still hope. I have seen, including myself, but I have seen people come back from the brink that they had literally said that. Like, there's no way that I'm ever going to get any better. There's no way that I could pay this amount of money off. There's no way that my spouse would ever take me back. There's no way that my kids would ever speak to me again. And time again, we get to be on this side of things. That every people, when they say that, if God met our expectations every time, then He wouldn't have the opportunity to exceed our expectations.
Yeah. Well, Graham, thanks for your time.
Oh man, thank you for having me.
Very much. Thank you for joining us. Know that you've been blessed today by Graham's message. If you've liked the content, be sure to share it and share it with your friends. Let them know about how you've been blessed by the words of encouragement that Graham gave today. Like us, share on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and tell others about this message that we have. Pay attention. God is doing something great in your life. Hope you have a great day. God bless.